Sometimes I like to think in life we have certain things backwards. So do you ever have those moments where God feels very close to you, like you feel as if He is pleased with you? And in those moments, we often just kind of like bask in that goodness of God. We're very glad, very grateful. And then you have other periods of time where God feels very distant. It almost can feel like He's angry with you, very displeased. And those are often the times we get on our knees and pray for forgiveness of our sins, and we acknowledge, I'm such a wreck, God, I screwed up. I want to read something from chapter 18 of Sirach, because I've thought of this a lot of times before, so I wanted to share this thought. Now, Sirach, you will not find Sirach in the Protestant Bibles, FYI, but you will find it in like Catholic Bibles, for example. So this is from chapter 18 of Sirach. It's up on my screen here. I'm just going to read verses 23 through 26. It says, "Before making a vow, prepare yourself. Do not be like one who puts the Lord to the test. Think of wrath on the day of death, the time of vengeance, when He will hide His face. Think of the time of hunger in the time of plenty, poverty and need in the day of wealth. Between morning and evening there is a change of time. Before the Lord all things are fleeting." Back when I read Sirach, verse 25 is really what stuck out to me. Think of the time of hunger in the time of plenty, poverty and need in the day of wealth. And I think there's something fascinating about this. Think about those situations in life where everything seems to be going well. You're getting ice cream with your friends. You feel like God's happy with you. Your finances are under control. Pretty much like those days or weeks when everything feels just great. You've had good friendships. You've been feeling well physically, mentally, emotionally, socially, even spiritually in every regard. And what Sirach says is so fascinating. Think of the time of hunger in the time of plenty. What's the time of plenty? I'm imagining a wedding feast, a banquet. Or if you're going to think of this in terms of life, just like I was describing, everything is going so well. Think of, and it says, poverty and need in the day of wealth. So sometimes I think we have things backwards, because I want to put this into practice more, because I don't do it very well. I think when my life is going well, I'm not so much thinking of the times when it's not, but rather I'm just kind of enjoying the fact that it's going well. And I still think of God, but I guess my heart is a little less repentant when it feels as if God is pleased to me. And maybe that's not the right disposition to have. Maybe when I feel holy or when God feels pleased with me is the times when I most actually need to get on my knees and just acknowledge before the Lord, first off, that everything good is from Him, and that I am a sinner, and I always need His mercy, even in those times of plenty. His mercy sustains me, and I need a repentant heart even in those times, and to just have some sort of self-introspection at my own sinfulness and how I can fall and how I want His grace and protection so that I don't. And I think sometimes the contrary is also true, right? When we are in those states of near despair or God feels distant from us, I feel like those are the times, of course we should still be repentant and have a penitential heart, but those are the times when maybe we most need to embrace the loving tenderness of God, because that's usually when it's hardest to do. So maybe if in times of prosperity we're able to reflect more on, as it says here, the time of hunger, then maybe it will be easier in the time of hunger to sort of embrace the prosperity that God does give us and His love and mercy. I want to read something from the 14 Rules of Discernment of St. Ignatius of Loyola. So these are rules for the discernment of spirits. And he has two sets of rules, St. Ignatius, a set of 14 and a set of 8. And if you become familiar with these rules, I'd recommend maybe you do it with reading a book by Father Timothy Gallagher. That's actually the book that I'm going to just be reading the rules from. But these rules go back to whenever St. Ignatius was around, 16th century or something like that. And I just want to read the 8th rule right here, and then also the 10th rule, because they're very relevant to this verse from Sirach. It reminds me of it. So the 8th rule here is this, and St. Ignatius of Loyola is very much talks about spiritual consolation and desolation. And consolation is what I described before. God feels very near to you in a way, and he feels very pleased with you. And you can almost describe spiritual desolation as God feels so distant, like he's so far, and you feel completely kind of isolated and abandoned. And just so you know, just because you feel that way does not mean it's true. But here's the 8th rule. The 8th. Let one who is in desolation work to be in patience, which is contrary to the vexations which come to him, and let him think that he will soon be consoled, diligently using the means against such desolation as is said in the 6th rule. So this is saying when you're in a situation where you're not in prosperity, or as Sirach describes it, in the time of hunger, when you're in the hunger, think of the prosperity that is to come, especially if he refers to the 6th rule. The 6th rule describes various practices, spiritual practices such as fasting, prayer, meditation, that you can do, especially when you're in this state of desolation. So when we're in that time of hunger, St. Ignatius is saying, let's think of the prosperity and the consolation which God is going to give to us. So it's a way of really embracing God's love in a situation where we don't necessarily feel it, but we know it's real and always persistent. And then the 10th rule, it says this. So this is sort of the counterpart. It says, let the one who is in consolation think how he will conduct himself in the desolation which will come after, taking new strength for that time. And that's exactly what Sirach says here in verse 25. Think of the time of hunger in the time of plenty. And that's what this says. When you're in consolation, God feels so close. You feel his love and everything. Everything seems so great spiritually. That's when we should often think of desolation. We should be a little bit mindful that a time will come when we don't feel that. A time will come when God feels very distant from us. And so if we prepare for desolation when we're in consolation, we will be able to handle it much better. And if we prepare for consolation when we're in desolation and anticipate it, we will be able to handle the desolation much better. And this is the proper disposition to have. It's one that I want to grow in. So I hope sharing this with you may allow you to reflect a little bit on these spiritual states and how we can how we can follow the advice found in the scriptures here to better our spiritual lives. Thanks for watching this video.